Welcome to Whisperer of Madness. If you're enjoying the story, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps grow the channel and this community. Determination and action, the spiritual flame of a morning star Magus had an intricate relationship with their body. Its strength also reflected the time the Magus had remaining. That Freya's necklace had encountered such a situation meant the original body of Blood Duchess Emma had likely been dealt severe damage in the foreign world. Trauma would weaken a Magus' vitality, which in turn caused such a change in the spiritual flame they left behind. Mentor. Freya's eyes turned red as she covered her mouth, but Leyland's secret imprint twinkled before he could try to console her. Yes, Faisal, Leyland frowned as he tapped the secret imprint open. Your Grace, my mentor. The spiritual flame of the first elder was extinguished a minute ago. Faisal's voice was husky. It was as if his heart had sunk and he was feeling hopeless. Extinguished, Leyland touched his chin. If the spiritual flame had been extinguished, the Morning Star Warlock's originally body must have perished. The only thing that supported the first elder's group was that he was still alive. There was still hope for them to return from the foreign world. And now that final hope had been shattered. Faisal's change was understandable. But what happened? Wasn't it all good until now? Leyland felt puzzled. It seemed like a conspiracy was afoot. Another connection request came up before Leyland could end Faisal's secret imprint call, and Kesha's panicked voice sounded out. Leyland! She called his name directly, forgetting about his current status. It showed how desperate she was. What happened? The ominous feeling in Leyland's heart grew stronger. Forgive me, Your Grace. Kesha paused to correct her misbehavior before continuing. It's mentor. The spiritual flame Duke Gilbert left behind has grown extremely unstable and is flickering strongly. I'm very worried. I got it, Leyland nodded, and his voice turned serious and solemn. Pass down my orders. All Crystal Phase Warlocks are to report to the meeting room. We might be in trouble. The Warlock elites were now congregated here instead of residing in their own territories. Since they were all in Phosphorescent Swamp, they could gather immediately after Leyland's orders were passed. Leyland reckoned that these people would not have come so fast if it was not related to their teachers. Duke Farlier. The panic-stricken Warlocks calmed a little upon seeing Leyland dressed in his huge robe. Please, sit down and be at ease. Leyland sat at the head chair. With his battle experience, he had long since acquired a dignified aura that turned the meeting room solemn. Thank you, Your Grace. A number of Crystal Phase Magi bowed and settled down in order. By virtue of being his wife, Freya occupied the seat next to Leyland, a fact that left some of the rest in envy. Leyland sighed while looking at the handful of Crystal Phase Warlocks in an upright position. The last war had caused tremendous loss to the Ouroboros clan, and the loss of their elite forces was especially tough to recover from. It would take at least a few hundred years for them to recover to peak condition. Shat, report. Leyland said after glancing across everyone, and called for Shat only when everyone settled down. Master! Shat wiped off the fog that was on his thick spectacles, bowing to Leyland immediately after he stood up. He spoke in a dignified manner. The spiritual flames of the elders that we'd kept in our technical department started fluctuating vigorously 24 minutes ago, and the first elders has completely died out. I'm afraid that. Leyland, too, felt somewhat frustrated and aggrieved. After all, this was the fall of another Morning Star Warlock. Even though Shat did not continue his words, Faisal and one of the Crystal Phase Warlocks had lowered their heads. Losing the first elder was definitely a huge blow to their morale. I've asked the other two Morning Star Seeds as well. It's not just a single spiritual flame that flickered, it's all of them. The other two elders must be in the same plight as the first elder in the foreign world. There was not much to say for now. After Shat sat down, the rest of the Warlocks placed their focus on Leyland. Upon seeing their reaction, Leyland cleared his throat. Shat, have the coordinates of the foreign world been confirmed? My apologies. The technical department and I have been working on this problem endlessly. There are 2 possible coordinates on our list. I will send them to you after this. A tinge of shame surfaced on Shat's face. This incident was a humiliation to the entire technical department. They had been overconfident and bragged that they were going to solve the problem in a few days' time, but took them nearly 5 years. It was such a dereliction of their duty. The Crystal Phase Warlock, who had tears in the eyes just like Faisal, slammed the table and shouted, Shat, you old fogey. Are you pulling strings and intentionally not revealing the coordinates of the foreign world? The moment he heard these words, Shat fumed with rage. Nonsense. I vow in the name of everyone in the technical department, never have I orchestrated something like that. Before, he'd suffered in silence because it had been difficult for him to locate the coordinates. Afterwards, there seemed to be another strange interference that added to the complexity, leaving him grasping at his hair. Could it be the interference of another organization that is not eager to see our dukes being saved? A thought surfaced in Shat's mind but was quickly suppressed as it was too sinister a plot. However, Faisal remained silent. His reaction affirmed the Warlock's suspicion, but before he could snarl at him, Faisal dragged his arm with force. "What the hell are you doing, Faisal?" the crystal phase Warlock growled. "Watch your manners, Marquis Ordefal." Faisal's voice was equally low, but it carried within an undeniable order. "I'm sorry, I acted out of line. Please forgive me, Marquis Shat." The Warlock's face blushed, but he still apologized to Shat and bowed to Leyland, who was in the head seat. "Please forgive me, Your Grace." "Never mind." Leyland waved and stared at Faisal with intrigue until sweat glided down his cheeks. Leyland took a last look at the Warlocks before he spoke in a low voice. "I have come to a decision. I will set off tomorrow to rescue the elders." There was a minute of pause, which then quickly recovered as excitement and joy could be seen in everyone's eyes. Still, they did not dare to show their emotions. They kept reminding Leyland not to fall for tricks. "My dear." After all the crystal phase Warlocks had been dismissed, only Freya was left behind, her eyes filled with worry. Emma was her mentor, but Leyland was her dearest husband. This situation was complicated, like a spider web that pulled her heart apart. At last, she asked, "This time round, is it going to be dangerous?" "Yes, there will be danger, but it's a chance too." "Trust me, I'll bring your mentor back." Leyland gave Freya a reassuring, heartwarming smile. Seeing Leyland with such confidence, Freya felt more at ease. However, she had missed the trace of complication in Leyland's eyes. After returning to the Magus Tower, Leyland went straight to the astral gate and fell into deep thought. "This time, I'm afraid that I really have to make the trip." Leyland was very clear on the fact that there were voices asking for his help being circulated in the Ouroboros clan, and they had grown stronger now. He had suppressed these messages as long as he could. He had to do something now, otherwise the entire Ouroboros clan might fall apart. Luckily, he had already gotten what he wanted during this period of time. Even if the other two Morning Star Warlocks returned, his power in the clan was unshakable. Also, Leyland was not too worried about the trip, as he had already formed a more complete strategy after getting to know the existence of the puppet master behind the scene. Almost at the same time, high up on a throne that was made from eternal darkness and rumbling thunder, the rank 5 Magus that had a moon rune on his forehead was exchanging thoughts with someone through telepathy. "How are things going with the Ouroboros clan?" "Everything has been prepared, and we are ready to take action. As long as the opponent enters the foreign world, we can block him completely from this world and wipe out the entire Ouroboros clan. You disappointed me the last time. I do not wish to see it again." The Radiant Moon Magus warned with great dignity. "There is no need to worry, Master." The Morning Star Conscient dispersed on its own, and the Radiant Moon Magus sat still in the throne, pondering. Was it really that kiddo in the ruins of Scarlet Crescent? What an interesting pup. A mysterious voice sounded in the air, but the Radiant Moon Magus did not seem surprised at all. "I wasn't quite confident, but Siebel's already dead. He's the most suspicious." Radiant Moon Magus spoke in a cold tone. "I have to get him. He's just a chem-in serpent warlock. Even if he had any trump cards, the bloodline shackles will be his Achilles' heel." The mysterious voice sounded in disdain. "Setting off, The Radiant Moon Magus nodded his head, and he suddenly felt a lot less uncertain. "That's right. Even though the rascal has immense, inexplicable strength, the bloodline shackles will be enough to stunt his growth. Chem-in warlocks can reach the peak of rank 4 at best, after which he won't have any room to grow." "Keek, you're right. Who would still care about a rascal that's confined to the Morning Star rank?" The mysterious voice suddenly changed to that of a lady, gentle and soft. "Your real enemy is—" "Shut up." The Radiant Moon Magus, who had originally been sitting down, stood up abruptly, looking sinister. "Shut your mouth this instant. Don't you know that as long as you mention his name, even if it is unintentional, he will be able to detect it? The power of a king isn't something a person of your lowly status can belittle." "Fine, but isn't it just a Breaking Dawn Magus?" The female voice replied indignantly, and she felt rather uneasy. It was as if everything that she had said carelessly today was inappropriate. This mysterious intuition had been left behind by the host of the body before her. I don't care about who you were before. Now you're but a damaged soul. The radiant moon Magus' voice was cold and assertive. But don't we have the same interests currently? I can help you, and in return you can offer me. The female's voice trailed off. Leyland did not know explicitly that Jupiter's lightning's radiant moon Magus had already made special arrangements to deal with him, but anyone with a brain would be able to infer it. As a result, he had to make preparations for his imminent trip. An enormous satellite hung in the sky, looking about to fall at any moment. It was surrounded by a nebula in the vast universe. Please take a look at this contract. You can sign here if there are no problems. Leyland rarely used his real identity, but now he was doing so. He was having a conversation with 3 other Morning Star Warlocks, with an already drafted contract on the table. Leyland picked up a cup of coffee and talked to the Warlocks opposite. During the period of time when I'm away, I would appreciate your help in guarding the Ouroboros clan in my place. Also, I would like you to prioritize helping my wife Freya and the Tower Genie should they require any help. Any questions? In front of him were Paul, Philip, and another stranger. Since he was looking for protectors, it was naturally better to rely on allies. There was no need to ponder much about Philip. He had the bloodline of the ancient Wind Wolf and was hot-blooded. And with respect to Paul, after being taken advantage of by Leyland the previous time, he now admired him even more. Based on High's words, his people respected highly intelligent beings. Leyland immediately thought of the rumors of them being fond of sucking up souls and drinking brain juices, and could not help but shudder. However, since they had already signed the contract, there wouldn't be any issue. The last Morning Star Warlock was a good friend Leyland had made recently, Mars. With these 3 in control, the might of the contract as well as the supervision and urging of the Morning Star area, Leyland was rather assured of the safety of the Ouroboros clan after he left. Everyone was familiar with each other, and the conditions that Leyland had offered were very generous. Though the terms of the contract were harsh, the 3 Morning Star Warlocks signed the contract without hesitation. Good luck! Philip patted Leyland's shoulders. Out of the 3 of them, he was probably the one who hoped the most for Leyland's success. Many thanks! Leyland was comforted as he punched Philip in a friendly manner. Ever since the happenings at Scarlet Crescent, the Wind Wolf Lair had not only lost a Morning Star Warlock. Palesa, their most important fighter Cybele, had been beaten down to become a regular Morning Star, and had to withdraw and conceal himself. A lot of pressure weighed on Philip's shoulders, and Leyland had lent him a hand. This had gained him Philip's gratitude, and the Wind Wolf Warlock now treated Leyland like kin. These were Philip's words, of course. However, Leyland obviously did not believe that and rolled his eyes in secret. Of course, the relationship on both ends had gotten increasingly better, and had even surpassed that of Leyland with the Wind Wolf Lair and Spirit Circle. That was the uncontestable truth. Phosphorescent swamp within the Morning Star Magus Tower. After sending everyone away, Leyland came before the astral gate alone. Tower Genie, once I leave, seal the Magus Tower immediately. Do not let anyone enter and await further instructions, HR instructed. He had prepared a lot of things for this expedition. This was different from the previous experiments where he just projected spiritual seeds. He was on a rescue mission and needed to move with his real body. This was extremely dangerous, and he could be completely lost in another world. Hence, the astral gate had to be kept completely safe. Nobody would trust someone else with a job like this. He could only leave this to the Tower Genie, which had no human emotions. In actuality, Leyland had prepared another safeguard. Even if this Tower Genie were rendered ineffective, he wouldn't end up stuck in another world. However, this was one of his deepest secrets, something only he could know. Rumble. With Leyland's order, the Magus Tower shut down, runic chains and defensive layers sealing off each and every pathway. Large numbers of puppets and void assassins with red light in their eyes began to patrol the area rigorously. Leyland, you must succeed and come back safely. Outside the Magus Tower, Freya's hands clutched tightly at her white dress as she prayed in her heart. Beside her stood Parker, Snoopy, and a few other high-ranked warlocks, all watching the Magus Tower that was being completely shut down. Their expressions were complex. Leyland obviously did not bother with this. His focus was entirely on the astral gate in front of him. Leyland had already calculated the coordinates of the world that Gilbert and the other dukes were lost in long ago. However, this was only for his own consideration, thus he had not announced it and even interfered with Shat's work in secret. This went on for 5 years. Now, it was necessary that he rescue the two dukes right away. Apart from Emma, Gilbert was his mentor and had taught him a great many things. The feelings and relationship between them was enough for Leyland to take this risk. Besides, that was another world. Even if it's a trap, they handed over the coordinates of another world. Leyland was emotional. Even the lowest grade world was definitely more powerful than a plane. The resources there were plentiful, enough to make morning stars and even radiant moons go green in envy. You didn't mind revealing the coordinates of a world just to trap Mentor and the rest. I wonder what your expression will be like if I completely take control of that world. A slight smile appeared across Leyland's lips. It was as if he could already see the flustered, exasperated look of the radiant moon Magus of Jupiter's lightning. A ball of light that looked like a star floated out from Leyland's hands and disappeared into the astral gate. Rumble. Through the connection of the astral gate, Leyland's soul force seemed to come into contact with an extremely complicated and tremendous world. The aura of sulfur and flames could be seen spilling over in copious amounts at the edges of the world. The astral stone reserves that acted as the energy core rapidly decreased, almost falling to a level that would issue a warning. Through some sensing, Leyland could confirm that this world was very far from the Magus world. Just the consumption from opening the astral gate once would leave one tongue-tied and wide-eyed. An aura full of flames and sulfur. Leyland was startled at first, but immediately eased up. It's no wonder that Mentor and the others mistook this place for Purgatory World. If not for the memories from ancient times, I'd be misled too. Tower Genie, maintain the energy reserves required for the astral gate. Be prepared to retrieve us immediately. Leyland's voice was low. Understood. The Tower Genie that was like a green elf immediately nodded. Prepare for the crossing of the main body. Leyland took in a deep breath. Though he had experienced teleportation to the Morning Star area, the idea of traveling such a long distance still had him slightly worried. Beep. Beginning collection of data. Establishing folder in database. The AI chip immediately intoned. This was very rare but expected. Even if it was an AI chip, it lacked first-hand research materials, and they could be supplemented at this moment. However, using myself as a guinea pig is really rather. Leyland rolled his eyes. The lights on the astral gate got increasingly brighter until he was eventually swallowed into it. Rumble. The bright tail of a blue beam appeared from the spire of the Magus Tower like an aurora, streaking through the dark skies like a magnificent meteor. It's beginning. Freya's felt her heartstrings tighten. It's beginning. Activate interference procedures. Things must be the same as before. Break off all of his communications and make him lose his way as well. In a jet-black world crack, Collins, who Leyland had seen several times before, was talking to a group of technical staff who were fiddling with some instruments. There was a large amount of data showing up on the screen. Energy interference mode activated. Warping force field structure completed. Interference can be engaged at any time. Energy particles taking form. Beginning tracking of trajectory and intercepting opponent. Multiple high-ranked magi acted like the most cautious scientists as they quickly operated the instruments in their hands, reporting various data. Good. Begin immediately. Collins swept his hand down viciously. It was as if he could already imagine Leyland's features contorted by terror, and the pleasure of vengeance immediately flooded his heart. He could not help but burst into laughter. We're here. Even though he was still in the midst of teleportation via the astral gate, Leyland was still clear-headed. The AI chip was now sending him warnings. Detected unknown force field reaction. Determined to be interference particle ripples. I've been waiting for you. An intelligent glint flashed in Leyland's eyes. A world knowing that it was a trap. Those who still jumped straight in were idiots. Leyland was obviously not an idiot. Since the other party had revealed that they had the ability to interfere with astral gates, Leyland obviously would not ignore them. In fact, in these 5 years, he had been silently surveying the other world. He had even attempted projecting spiritual seeds, all in order to thoroughly understand the other party's ability to interfere. Through the 5 years of probing that seemed to only last a day, he had long since understood the methods they could use like the back of his hand. He'd even prepared a contingency plan. It's offensive pattern number 3. Activate corresponding countermeasures. Leyland's eyes glinted with intelligence. Task initiated. Spatial anchor being projected, tracing target's coordinates. The AI chip began to operate methodically. A layer of mysterious spatial undulations was emanated from Leyland's body. Target coordinates have been determined. Proceed with attack, the AI chip asked with a robotic voice. Yes, a smile appeared about Leyland's lips. Bang, boom, a glass meter exploded and many pieces of apparatus burst into flames. Collins, who was watching on, was about to go berserk. What's going on? Who can tell me what's going on? Collins roared, his eyes red. Even Breaking Dawn Magi would find it difficult to obtain this high-grade spatial interference apparatus. This time, so many pieces had readings that went off the charts, and his master would probably murder him. The other party seems to have grasped some sort of spatial technique and is counterattacking. An old man pushed at the lens in his glasses and concluded. Are you kidding me? Do you know how valuable research on spatial techniques is? How did he get it? Collins' first reaction was that of disbelief. But that's the only explanation. If the other party's spatial knowledge reserves are vaster than ours, we'll probably have to be on our guard against the following spatial attacks. The old man spoke rapidly. Spatial attacks? Collins was stunned, and immediately after saw the earth-shattering spatial turbulence that submerged the area. The effects aren't half bad. Listening to the prompt from the AI chip, Leyland's mood immediately improved. Arcane arts and knowledge regarding spatial coordinates were obviously insanely expensive. They were rarely seen, even in the Morning Star area. However, he had the AI chip and did not need very complete information. Hence, he had purchased just a few incomplete ones. Though he could not be considered a great master in this area, attacking a few guys who were similarly newbies wouldn't be a problem. You dare! An enraged voice sounded. Another Magus with a black moon rune on his forehead suddenly appeared at the boundary of the world, trying to intercept Leyland. I am your opponent. Along with the sounds of a lion growling, another Warlock with hair that seemed to be cast out of gold appeared in front of that Magus. Wade! The radiant moon Magus called out in a low tone, his expression revealing his fear. The other plan has been launched. Is that the radiant moon Magus from Jupiter's lightning? Leyland turned and took a glimpse, storing the other party's appearance in his memory. Whoosh. As he was breaking through the protective sphere of a world, enormous astral forces had been activated, and Leyland felt himself go dizzy. His body seemed to turn into a streak of light and then completely disappeared. Compared to a prepared teleportation formation, the strength one required to move freely about the astral plane was much higher. The huge pressure was as if a slab of steel was pressing down on Leyland's body. Cold, stifling, frenzied. Leyland immediately felt his bones creaking, and the defensive aurora on his body began to shatter bit by bit. Perhaps even the pressure tens of thousands of meters under the sea can't compare to this. This was the last conscious thought Leyland had. Before he completely fainted, the only thing he could do was to use multi-limb strength and cover his body with dark green energy. In a world of lava, large crevices could be seen in the earth, magma surging inside like a network of red rivers. Space distorted on the surface of a large black rock, forming a translucent gate of light. It incessantly generated lightning in the surroundings. The lightning crashed down more and more frequently as the entire area was filled with a dazzling white light. Boom! The white light exploded, forming an eye-piercing radiance. When all the light vanished, the original gate of light and the lightning had all disappeared, leaving behind only charred traces that recounted the strange events that had just occurred. Ha! I finally entered. Leyland furrowed his brows, sensing the large amount of fire elemental particles surrounding him. This concentration, Magi would believe it if someone said this was the fire elemental world. Intense pain could be felt from various parts of his body, causing him to groan and bend his back. AI chip, Leyland immediately ordered. Check my current condition. Beep. Host body's soft tissue damage is at 30.87%. Fractures found at 7 areas, and signs of bruising observed on internal organs. Immediate treatment is recommended. The AI chip loyally intoned, transmitting a 3D human figure to him. The blue image held many signs of wounds. Even with Leyland's current vitality, he was still injured to this degree. Other regular Magi would probably have completely disappeared without a trace. His astonishing vitality and Warlock bloodline were slowly mending the injuries in his body, allowing his tightly furrowed eyebrows to relax. That was really dangerous. I almost died outside the protective sphere. While recalling what had just happened, Leyland couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. The protective sphere. This was the edge of a world and even included part of the void. It could be said to be a large world's strongest defense. In general, every world had this protective sphere, though its strength varied. The most famous protective sphere was probably the world of gods, Crystal Wall. Its powerful isolation ability was enough for even magi at rank 7 and above to be forced to return in defeat. It included a large world and various planes, forming the world of gods, unique culture of strength. It even cut off attempts at peeping from other worlds, save for that one time when the ancient magi had invaded them. Before reaching the lava world, Leyland was able to regain consciousness with the protection of multi-limb strength, preventing him from being in a bad situation. If one wanted to use a metaphor, a large world's protective sphere was like customs upon entry to a country. If Leyland had not woken, he would need to force his way in, and would definitely be met with attacks, especially from the malicious intent of the world will. The method Leyland had employed this time was akin to slipping through a barrier. He had not been discovered by the world will, and the focus on him was evidently minimal, which would aid in his later movements. And this! Leyland pulled a silver necklace full of astral light from his neck. After sensing that the connection was undamaged, he could completely relax. This necklace represented his connection with the astral gate in the Magus world. As long as the connection there was not broken, he could teleport back at any time through the gate. Right when Leyland had left the Magus world, Colin's attack had been in order to completely cut off this connection, leaving Leyland stranded in another world and unable to find his way home for eternity. Gilbert and the other two had been defeated using this method. Of course, Collins had been made a fool of by Leyland and would probably not be able to emerge for a long time. The largest danger had been obstructed by Wade, and Leyland finally had some time to do what he wanted. Saving the two dukes also fit with Leyland's plans for benefits. After all, he was not strong enough to go head-to-head against Jupiter's lightning. He needed a few other people to relieve the pressure, and Gilbert and Emma were very good candidates for this. Furthermore, Gilbert was Leyland's mentor, not someone he could abandon so easily. After considering for some time and finding the best way out for himself, Leyland still chose to come forward and save them. But this world is so huge. Where am I to find them? Leyland watched the lava lake that stretched as far as he could see, as well as the burning clouds in the sky, and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Beep, testing surroundings. At this moment, the AI chip immediately projected the analysis of the surroundings before Leyland. This! Leyland's soul force was sent out to explore, and he immediately sensed the difference from what he was used to. In the lava world, his spiritual force seemed sluggish, a result of the laws of this world not being harmonious with his own. As expected, with a switch in worlds, the dimensions, energy levels, and even the interactions between particles are starkly different. The changes in laws are definitely a huge obstruction to magi who travel between worlds. A thread of understanding flashed in Leyland's eyes. This was the precious experience that many ancient magi had gathered through their blood and sweat. Thankfully, I've already condensed my point mass. Soul force is still useful in most worlds, and only needs some slight alterations. If it was still spiritual force, I'm afraid. Relief rose in Leyland's heart. Soul force was a high-grade power and could be used in many worlds. Its practicality trumped that of spiritual force. Leyland estimated that if he still used spiritual force here, he would probably have to deal with the awkwardness of not fitting in. He might even need to cultivate it from the beginning and turn his spiritual force into the spiritual strength unique to this world. Though there would be no bottleneck, it would definitely require a lot of effort. Now, with the use of soul force, this issue was mostly solved. It's no wonder that ancient magi placed Morning Star as the minimum rank to attack other worlds. So there's this factor. Leyland touched his chin. Beep. Data on surroundings completely gathered. Generating elemental map. Analyzing world's laws. Beginning fine-tuning of host body's soul undulations. Assistance over 5 years of progress, and the addition of a large amount of information on the soul from Leyland's end that he'd acquired through trade and missions. The AI chip's analysis on the soul had reached a whole new level. Though it still could not completely enumerate soul force, it was not far from this goal, and could perform many unbelievable deductions and integrations. Things like altering the soul undulations being emitted by him were only one part of it. The concentration of fire elemental particles is the highest here. If I modify the spell models of the Magus world, I might achieve an even more astounding bonus to my power. Leyland touched his chin and watched the elemental map, his eyes glowing. Meanwhile, his aura had already begun to change. A dim layer of light flickered into existence and quickly covered his body. The entire space seemed to distort for a while, but at the same time, it seemed as if nothing had happened. Leyland suddenly sighed deeply, and his body seemed to incorporate itself seamlessly into the surroundings. "I've finally rid myself of that feeling of being spied on. World will," he sighed, tones showing his relief. "Luckily, the protector of this world is similar to the consciousness of Gaia, and not some living being. If not, I wouldn't have been able to dupe them so easily." After traveling to another world, there was an issue of how to deal with the ill intent from the world. The undulations of Morning Star Magi were as obvious as a lit torch in the darkness. It would definitely attract the attention of the world, and things would be even more troublesome in a world that was not their own. If he completely infuriated the world will, it was like inviting a god of death to his side. It would bring about unceasing bad luck. Even Morning Star Magi would be played to death, forget anyone else. Leyland's aura changed, and he was now just like the occupants of this world, not standing out in the least. "This way, I have completely descended into this world. I wonder where Mentor Gilbert and the others are." Leyland furrowed his eyebrows, and a tremendous and terrifying soul force was sent out to scan the surrounding areas. Though soul force had no form and was intangible, the instant a morning star power exploded, the entire space would seem to halt, and even the lava would stop roaring. The world was a fiery red. With the spread of his soul force, he could see much more of the lava river network. This place seemed like it was near a crater, with practically no signs of life. The reason why he said there was practically none was because Leyland had found a plant. This was a plant similar to a black metal tree. The roots were fixed firmly in the ground, almost entering the lava, and the whole trunk had a black luster. Even the high temperature of the lava did not cause this tree to wither at all. "At least there's some signs of life, or else I'd have assumed only elemental beings could survive in this world." Leyland nodded, but his expression suddenly changed as he glanced in a direction. There, he had keenly felt the undulations of some being, and it was a large one at that. "The Aboriginals," Leyland chuckled. His body merged into the air and began to move in the direction that the energy had come from. Not long after, he reached his destination and watched a large battle. At one side of the battlefield was a group of beings, each 2 to 3 meters tall and looking similar to humans. Even when boiling hot lava made contact with their glistening black skin, it did not result in a large reaction, which meant their resistance to heat was very high. They also had a single little horn on their heads. There were about 10 or so one-horned beings, holding black lances and other weapons as they surrounded and attacked a giant monster. This monster was completely red. There was a thick layer of rocks on its body that looked like a shell, lines of lava flowing down like little streams. It was 10 or so meters tall, looking like a large worm with its lower body submerged in lava. It seemed to be a being that lived only within the lava. Pack. With a ferocious sweep, several of the one-horned beings were flung away, and the creature spat out a golden liquid from its mouth. The liquid was of an unbelievably high temperature, and the moment the liquid landed on the ground, it began to burn fiercely. Even the one-horned beings were in trouble, and those that had the golden liquid splashed on them immediately showed signs of burns appearing on their bodies. KKNGSGFCAMG. The few leaders of the one-horned race immediately began to yell using a very strange method. They did not seem to employ vocal cords, instead making sounds directly from the lower abdomen. It was similar to the ventriloquists from his previous world. "As expected, I can't understand it at all." Leyland was speechless, but luckily, issues like this were not a huge problem. Secretly following them for a period of time and having the AI chip analyze their language would work, but Leyland had an even better method. Whoosh! A thread of dim soul force quickly disappeared into the head of a one-horned being who was heavily injured. "Ugh!" That one-horned being began to struggle vigorously, and yet could only whimper uselessly. His fellow clansmen thought he was crying out in pain, and hence this did not arouse their interest. Meanwhile, images flashed in front of Leyland's eyes like in a movie. Soon enough, this being's entire life was presented before Leyland, from his birth, including his growth, to his death. Everything was clearly recorded by the AI chip. Beep. Identified unnamed language. Saving in database. Beep. Generated map of vicinity, as well as basic information on Lava World and the races. From the great amount of memories, the AI chip had found much useful information and began to organize them systematically, sorting them into the corresponding fields of knowledge. Good. Set the name of this unnamed language as lava language and transmit it to my memories. Leyland immediately used this function. In less than a second, Leyland had learnt the language of this world. Though they had different bodies, that was a problem easily solved by magic and some illusions. Only at this point did the meaning of the yells of those one-horned beings emerge in Leyland's mind accurately. Wookma, leave! A being with a body larger than the rest of the one-horned clansmen stood in front of the lava worm, pushing a one-horned being with a smaller stature away. Chick chick! The giant lava worm roared, opening its mouth and swallowing this one-horned being. The one-horned being called Wookma was stunned as she sat on the ground, eyes losing their focus. Damn it! Wookla's finished. The ceremony is a failure. How were we so unlucky as to encounter a lava worm? The other one-horned beings' faces were filled with remorse, and one of them began to curse. It must have something to do with Klin Clan. When the time comes, I'll definitely kill them. Hearing this, bitter laughs sounded from the other one-horned beings. In this situation, being able to survive was already a luxury. What was the point of saying things like that? The terrifying spit of the lava worm had already reached Wookma, and it was much too late for rescue attempts. A few of these clansmen closed their eyes, unable to watch. Wookma had only just grown to adulthood and was usually a passionate, bright child. To think she would die here. A few other young clansmen were already roaring while they pounced forward. Roar. The expected pain did not come, and Wookma opened her eyes curiously, finding a strange being in front of her. This being looked very strange. He had no horns, no black skin, and physically looked small. He looked about the size of a 3- or 4-year-old in the clan. However, it was this small figure that had easily blocked the attack of the lava worm, and from the opponent's howls there was a trace of fear. Yes, Wookma was sure of it. The powerful lava worm was actually afraid of this little thing. Are you all right? The weird being in front of her spoke, using the language of her tribe. Wookma naturally understood. I am fine. Are you of the ant tribe? Though you don't have their feelers, your skin color and physique match. Wookma seemed to have forgotten the danger in front of her and began to strike up a conversation with Leyland. Leyland was speechless at the actions of this tribe, and instead exerted strength in his arms. Ka-cha, ka-cha. A giant red hand that was 10 or so meters long fished the lava worm up easily. Its 5 fingers exerted a force one by one, causing the lava worm to roar in pain. Layer after layer of rock fragments peeled off and fell from its body, and by the time the magma armor had disappeared, its physique had obviously become much smaller. Even its aura had strangely weakened. Interesting. Leyland watched the magma shell dropping off. The golden liquid from before was transported through a series of complicated pathways through which its effects were amplified, turning from ordinary lava to the powerful golden lava. An amplification spell formation. But I don't see any resemblance to one. Leyland's eyes shone with interest, the large hand exerting more force. More layers fell from the lava worm's body. Yet another layer of magma fell, and the lava worm was now only 2 or 3 meters long. Its aura suddenly weakened till it could not match up to the most ordinary one-horned clansman. AI chip, remember these patterns, Leyland secretly commanded. There were many paths and research methods in these other worlds, and also ample experimental materials. All of these were things that Magi would go berserk over, and also one of the main reasons they were willing to risk death to explore other worlds. Boom! The last of the magma slid off, and the lava worm that had seemed enormous had turned into a fat, meaty worm that was just over a meter long. Unihorn race, thank you for saving Wookma, revered powerful one. Rather than the young female, 2 other one-horned beings came forward with their right arm on their chest, doing a strange action. May I know the powerful one's name? Leyland noticed an investigative glint that had been concealed well in their eyes. There were even traces of suspicion, but he had already come up with a plan. I am Lei, of the Winged People. I am currently traveling to learn more about different cultures, so there is no need to thank me. The Great Will of Lava was the one who orchestrated all this. With the memories of that one-horned tribal, Leyland's speech was just like that of the lava world's aboriginals, and his disguise was seamless. The so-called winged people were a shield Leyland had found for himself. Through the other party's memories, he had found that all the different races of Lava World looked totally different from regular Wooks, and only the winged people tribe were somewhat similar. As for the wings, with his skills in magic as a morning star, creating 2 wings was too simple. So you are a friend of the winged tribe. Welcome to the blazing thorn land. The winged people were a peace-loving minority in the lava world. They were usually scattered throughout the land and did not cause any trouble with any large organizations. Hence, these 2 one-horned beings, even if they didn't let their guards down completely, lost a lot of their suspicion. They invited Leyland enthusiastically to a city nearby to rest. Leyland, who had other intentions, naturally rejected them for a while, before going with the situation and agreeing. Overjoyed, the 2 clansmen immediately used whatever they had at hand and conducted a banquet in Leyland's honor. What surprised Leyland the most was that their meal today was the lava worm. It had to be said that when one repressed the disgust at placing the lava worm's meat in their mouth, the expected terrible taste did not appear. The meat was actually similar to chicken, and also had a fragrant and sweet juice. It was a rare delicacy. This was especially true in the lava world. Food that had high water content was actually one of the rarest ingredients. Lord Ley, thank you so much. Also, Wookma thanked Leyland with a tone full of admiration, passing over a large portion of the meat of the worm. What is it? Leyland answered, finding the situation funny. May I see your wings? I've heard that the wings of the winged people are the most beautiful things in the world. Wookma's eyes were full of admiration, but that only had Leyland feeling like laughing and crying at the same time. The most beautiful. I'm afraid us winged people can't take that title, but I can fulfill your request. Leyland nodded, not caring if this was just the pure fantasies of a little girl, or if someone was trying to sound him out. After he stood up, the clothes on his back tore open, revealing a pair of large, snow-white wings. When spread out, they were a good 4 or 5 meters long, and the wings that looked like that of an angel wrapped Leyland within. At the edges of these fine, pure white feathers, there were traces of a golden luster. With this appearance, I could even pretend to be an angel in my previous world, Leyland thought with a laugh. At the same time, he saw that behind Wookma, who looked full of admiration, the other 2 one-horned clansmen were surprised. Based on their previous conversation, Leyland knew that one was called Wook, and the other was Wookber. They were part of the largest one-horned clan nearby, the Wook clan. In the lava world, matured one-horned clansmen had to hunt for food by themselves, a rite of passage. However, they had been unlucky, or rather been plotted against. That was why they had encountered a lava worm, and an enraged one at that. If not for Leyland acting, these people might all have died here. Mr. Ley, I heard that you're a traveler. Can you tell me stories about other places? Wookma's hands were under her chin as she laid on her stomach in front of Leyland like a curious baby. Combined with her almost 3-meter-tall stature and horn, she gave off an appearance that would scare any regular child into crying in his previous world. The contrast was stark. Please wait for a while. I still want to discuss something with your uncles. Leyland smiled. All the information he had obtained had come from the unlucky guy who had died. If he was asked about some other matters, that might expose his identity, and he had hence quickly changed the subject. All right, Wookma, go to bed. We still have things to discuss with Mr. Ley. Wook stood up. He sent the pouting Wookma away and chuckled, finding this embarrassing. My apologies, Mr. Ley, she's only a child. Indeed, I don't blame her. Leyland shook his head. The glint from his eyes made the 2 clansmen afraid to look him in the eye. But, why did you try to probe me? Nothing gets past Mr. Wook and Wookber exchanged a glance and began laughing wryly. The blazing bonfire gradually died out, and only the red lava river in the distance slowly emitted dark red rays. The flickering flames covered the faces of these beings, giving a feeling of light and darkness being unable to be determined. Leyland, who was listening to these 2 speak, also had a grim expression as he nodded or shook his head from time to time, looking to be deep in thought. The next day, Wook and Wookber announced that Leyland would temporarily join and return with them. This immediately resulted in many cheers, with Wookma's the loudest. Seeing Wook and Wookber's confident expressions, Leyland had the urge to laugh. Last night, They had told him about some conflict between organizations and some persecution they were facing. Though Leyland had not understood much, nor could he be bothered to, his expression looked like he understood completely. His outward hatred immediately netted a favorable opinion from these two. From the looks of it, they seemed to think of him as a reliable power, or rather, as a savior of sorts. Leyland found this hilarious but had to endure it. "Mr. Ley, what are you thinking about?" Wookma immediately began to cling to him, and Leyland pressed against his forehead with nothing to say. Leyland could work independently and find where the large creatures gathered, searching the strongest one's soul, and therefore obtaining more information in a convenient manner. However, this would cause a huge ruckus and arouse needless suspicion, as well as the attention from the world's will. The cons outweighed the pros. Even without attention from the world's will, the lava world was a world, and definitely had someone with a battle might have at least the Morning Star realm. The moment he besieged and enraged large powers, even Leyland could not be certain he would be able to escape safely. His motive was to save the two Chemian dukes, which was why he had to maintain a low profile until he found them. Though this method of blending in was slightly troublesome, the advantage was the safety, and there weren't any loopholes. What allowed Leyland to feel at ease was that time flowed different in other worlds and in the Magus world. 1 year might have passed in the Magus world, while only a month or even a few days had passed here, which was why he still had plenty of time. Since Jupiter's lightning set up a trap here, they must have found this world's coordinates long ago and occupied an area here. Leyland's thoughts began to gain clarity. Perhaps even that radiant moon Magus has quite a few clones here in charge. They might have set up some traps and are waiting for me to get caught, which is why I can't make mistakes. After following the group for a few days, a silhouette of a black city could be seen in the distance. That was a giant city of rock. Whether it was the houses or city walls, they were all made of giant black boulders. Though the city wall was low, the men of another race who were standing tall above it were robust and valiant. "We're home!" Many single-horned clansmen immediately cheered, but at the thought of their siblings who had died, they could not help but begin to lower their heads and weep. "This is a place where intelligent beings gather, but my soul force has yet to make any discoveries of them." His concealed soul force swept through the place, but Leyland's expression did not change despite his sighing inside. In a palace constructed of large black rocks, Leyland saw the leader of the one-horned race's Wook clan. These leaders were usually called the Intellectual One. "Revered Intellectual One, please accept the blessings of a guest from far away." Following custom, Leyland placed a few portions of lava worm meat in front of a wrinkled one-horned being as a gift. At this moment, only the two of them were in the large palace. Wook and the rest had long since hurried back. "Lava worm. These beings usually like to stay in lava and seldom come out. After being aggravated, they will explode with terrifying lava attacks. It's all thanks to you that Wookma and the rest could return safely." The elderly Intellectual One nodded, grabbing at the lava worm and beginning to eat without reservations. Juice splashed everywhere and fell from the corner of its mouth, droplets landing on the straw mat. This was a tradition of the one-horned race. Enjoying the gift in front of the guest was a sign of respect. Leyland appeared to be sitting at a side respectfully, though in actuality, his soul force had already covered the surroundings. "This intellectual being has pretty good abilities at the strength of a rank 1 or 2 Magus. It's a pity that it's still too weak." The old one-horned clansman obviously did not notice Leyland's gaze that held pity, and when it was done with the meal, it touched its lips. "Well then, is there anything I can help you with? Just say the word." "Of course, I have a difficult problem that I need your help with." Leyland smiled slowly while softly stating his request. Rank, it was the early morning, and the air was refreshing, a situation that seldom occurred. Even the lava rivers weren't boiling hot right now. The large black city gates opened slowly, and a small caravan made its way through. Within the caravan were many black one-horned clansmen. Their mode of transport was a giant creature that looked like a snail. Their shells towered high, a few openings in them made expressly for the easy retrieval of items. There were no goods in the huge shell of the largest mount, and only a space that was specially cleared for Leyland to sit in, with his legs crossed. Though this snail's movements weren't especially quick, it was advantageous in that there were practically no jolts from the travel. Even the temperature of this place was different from that of the surroundings, and it left Leyland feeling very satisfied. At the thought of the unwillingness to part on Uma's face, as well as Wook and Wookbo's stunned expressions, Leyland had the urge to laugh. He had no plans on interfering with matters relating to other races. That intellectual one had also known from the aura undulations that Leyland had intentionally emanated, that he was not to be provoked, and did not want to keep a time bomb like Leyland around. Hence, everything clicked together. The one-horned race immediately agreed to bring Leyland along on their next travel. With the traveling merchants as the guide, they brought Leyland to a bigger city. In all honesty, compared to the city where many different races lived together in harmony, the black city that the one-horned race had built was like a town in the countryside. Walking City, the largest city in the blazing Thornland. I hope it won't let me down. Leyland's eyes flashed with a glint that nobody could see through, while his hands began to move quickly. Large amounts of Magus materials were fished out of his spatial ring and arranged to form a small-scale spell formation. The whole process was covert, and not the slightest sound was made. It was not just the one-horned beings outside. Even the snail that Leyland was sitting on did not feel it. Buzz. An extremely slight undulation that only Morning Star-ranked Chemian warlocks could detect was transmitted into the distance. Go! 2 dull spiritual flames appeared on Leyland's hands, quickly disappearing into the spell formation. Following that, Leyland closed his eyes, a thread of soul force linking with the spell formation. His mind seemed to pass through the snail shell and arrive outside, spreading further. A long while later, Leyland opened his eyes and shook his head. It still isn't working. This is the limit of what I can do. I'm afraid the 2 dukes aren't in this region. Leyland sighed, his expression complicated. A world was much too large. It could be said that the lava world far surpassed the central continent in terms of surface area. To find 2 people in such a large area, a needle in a haystack couldn't even begin to describe it. Though Gilbert and the rest were Morning Star warlocks and would definitely make a name for themselves wherever they were, one had to remember that Jupiter's lightning definitely had an organization here. It was possible that before he could even find Gilbert, the radiant moon magi would be at his doorstep wanting his life. But Morning Star's strength is rare even in other worlds. If I was a Magus from Jupiter's lightning, I would probably scheme to seize control of large-scale organizations and find a way to lure other members to come over as well. Leyland began to envisage the plans that Gilbert and the others would make after coming here suddenly, and immediately had several trains of thought. I'm afraid I'll have to go to other large cities. Intelligence groups there must have the information I want. Leyland's eyes shone, and he pointed at the spell formation in midair. Layer of crimson flames immediately started to rage, swallowing the spell formation and the 2 soul fires within. In the crimson flames, the spell formation that had originally been large and oversized shrunk down into little droplets that rolled around and disappeared into a soul crystal. When the crimson flames had died out, all that was left was a red crystal the size of a fist. At the heart of the crystal were 2 fine silver-white flames that intertwined, forming the strange shape of the Ouroboros. All right, the sensing technique has been set. I won't need to go through the troublesome task of setting up a spell formation every single time in the future. Leyland looked relaxed as he kept the crystal properly. Immediately after, he felt the whole group come to a halt. What's going on? Furrowing his brows, Leyland opened the shell of the snail and went outside. Mr. Ley, there's a battle going on outside. The undulations have already reached the Earth grade, hence I've ordered the group to stop. A giant one-horned clansman came before Leyland, looking very respectful. Initially, he had had qualms regarding Intellectual One's plans, but after Leyland had shown some tricks, the other party was immediately taken in. His gaze towards Leyland was full of deference. Oh, I didn't notice that just now. Leyland nodded, spreading a pair of large white wings from his back. A powerful strength flowed through them, allowing his body to fly into the air. This expansive view immediately allowed him to view the scene far away. Energy undulations were spread recklessly, and 2 figures moved to and fro in the lava, filling the whole sky with magma droplets. Indeed, energy at the Earth grade, Leyland nodded. This world naturally did not have the same classification system as the Magus world, but several beings with extraordinary strength still existed here, though the differences in ranking were not as distinct. From what Leyland knew, individuals who had exemplary abilities only had a few divisions. Exemplary, Earth, Sky, Star. Based on Leyland's understanding, Exemplary referred to knights and acolytes, and they were beings which possessed the slightest bit of extraordinary strength. They were the lowest stratum. Earth referred to the equivalents of official magi, or perhaps those who could reach rank 2. Similarly, sky were the strong ones, as strong as rank 3. And those of star rank were beings who existed in legends and myths, and were on par with the Magus world's morning star magi. The classification of stars allowed Leyland to guess that Lava World definitely had been influenced by the Magus world. Or, at least, there had been a few morning star magi that had paid attention to this world. If not, the classification of stars would not be so similar. As for strength, the one-horned race that Leyland had seen up to this point depended completely on their body. Only the intellectual one he saw that day seemed to have awakened some magical ability, which was rather decent. The two beings of another race that were fighting in front of Leyland paled in comparison to the intellectual one from before, whether in terms of the intensity of their energy or undulations. However, after observing for a long while, Leyland made a discovery: a summoning ability. And it's the power of a totem. These two were obviously not of the one-horned race. One of them was extremely obese, to the point that their waist couldn't even be seen. A long nose hung from its face, making it look like an upright elephant, except that its skin was bright yellow. The other was green, and from the big-headed race. It had an exceptionally small body and very nimble arms, with many runes and spell patterns rolling from its fingertips and being carved into the ground. Ignite. With its voice, the image on the ground suddenly brightened, a layer of soil solidifying to form a berserk bear-like creature. A pentagonal spell formation appeared on the elephant clansman, and in the next moment, the space seemed to shatter. A large double-headed cheetah descended from another space. The two creatures looked each other face to face, and then began to tear at one another viciously, powerful energy undulations sweeping through the region. There's a shadow of the Magus world here. It seems that the ancient Magus world once took over many worlds and made use of the strengths of this place, giving rise to many strength-based systems. Looks like the rumors were real. Leyland watched on with interest, occasionally finding traces of some systems similar to that in the Magus world from their usage of energy. However, his attitude of watching leisurely had clearly offended the two of them. "You damned bird person! What are you looking at?" The elephant man roared, and it summoned a large goshawk, its sharp feathers and claws like steel as they emanated glints that inspired terror. The goshawk caught out and pounced towards Leyland, its large talons seemingly able to tear through anything. The other opponent seemed to have slowed his movements, standing aside and waiting to watch a good show. "Really?" Leyland couldn't help but shake his head, watching the goshawk that was throwing itself at him speechlessly. Never did he expect that watching such a spectacle could cause trouble. Summoning methods can technically be divided into elemental summoning, spatial summoning, bloodline summoning, all the way to the greatest, which is world summoning. The summoning methods here are probably those of the lowest level, spatial summoning. They can only instantly summon contracted beings of this world before the summoner. Leyland touched his chin, watching the goshawk that was pouncing over, and suddenly laughed. For some reason, after seeing that smile, the elephant man on the ground felt a chill, as if he had done something very wrong. Soul force invaded the insides of the goshawk's mind. Leyland immediately found a spell formation that symbolized a contract. It was twinkling, and as if it had discovered the invasion of another being, it began to retaliate. However, soul force was far too powerful. With just a sweep, the elephant man's low-grade spiritual force was utterly defeated, and the spiritual branding had also been erased. The large goshawk felt giddy, and suddenly found the white-winged person in front of it favorable, circling around Leyland. Impossible! The intense spiritual attack, as well as the erasing of his mark, immediately caused the elephant man to be seriously injured. He involuntarily cried out and spat a mouthful of fresh blood, crumbling down on the spot. The other opponent seemed to be scared out of its wits and stayed rooted to the spot. How could this summoning partner of his be defeated in such a straightforward manner? The green-skinned clansman felt like his thoughts came crashing down. He was beginning to pity his opponent. Just a casual act had provoked such a terrifying existence. They had to be at least of the sky rank. Walking City, Mr. Lay. The rest of the Wooks celebrated upon Leyland's return, worship in their eyes. There was a respect for power that was imprinted into their very bloodlines, and now it had shown itself. "It's all settled, let's continue." Leyland returned to the seat in the giant snail shell, looking calm. Indeed, the two rank 1 magi did not warrant Leyland's attention. However, it had surprised Leyland how much the AI chip had advanced after deriving the energy transformation formulas of the rank 1 magi. Beep. Decoding of 15 rank 1 fire element spells, 7 rank 2 spells, and 3 rank 3 spells has been completed. Leyland's face broke into a smile after hearing the notice from the AI chip. Due to the difference in the rules of the lava world, spell models of the Magus world could not directly be used in it and had to be slightly altered. For other magi to do such a thing would require a lot of research, something that was potentially troublesome. The spells had to each be studied and analyzed individually. However, Leyland had the ability to analyze the spells in batches and instantly managed to understand many of the spells. "In this case, I can recover most of my strength before we reach walking." A streak of light flashed, and he slowly closed his eyes. The giant caravan started to move slowly after the short pause, the Wook clansmen at ease. After all, with the almighty Mr. Lay overseeing them, there was not much to worry about during the journey, be it the bandits of the wilderness or disasters of nature and beasts. As a matter of fact, with Leyland around, they were rarely affected by natural disaster, and even avoided huge crises many times. After some time, the one-horned race eventually worshipped Leyland like a god. They had never been at such ease before, usually losing more than half their merchants and consuming large amounts of supplies for every trip. Their parting with Leyland was full of reluctance. The chief of the caravan tried his best to persuade Leyland not to leave, even hinting that he could stay even if the intellectual one refused. But how would Leyland agree? He left with a smile. Walking City, the largest city in the blazing Thornland. The entire city was built in a huge barren desert, with raging winds roaring every once in a while. The place appeared desolate, but Leyland knew that such living conditions were considered exemplary in the lava world. In the lava world, the intelligent creatures thrived best in the areas where there was no lava flow. Other than the pure fire elemental creatures, few species would enjoy living near the edge of the lava. In here, other than the shortcoming that the temperature was slightly higher, it wasn't very much different from that of the deserts in the Magus world, and hence was considered conditions that were good enough. Nevertheless, these non-human species are really. The dress code and appearances of the Magi in Walking City differed greatly from what he was used to. Leyland was a little speechless at the unique structure of the buildings and the large crowd of passers-by, who were predominantly non-human. To Leyland's surprise, the one-horned race whom he had encountered early were actually more human than most. At least they looked similar to normal humans. With non-humans who had numerous eyes and limbs were barely considered normal, Leyland was completely shocked when he saw a humongous green caterpillar, with hat and stick, in a store. It, ignorant of his gaze, was in a heated argument with the store's owner. Despite his adventure experience in the Magus world, Leyland had mostly only been exposed to humans. Although the central continent held many non-humans, humans were still the majority while the rest eked out an existence in the shadows, even if they were mixed bloods who looked human. However, in this place, Leyland felt like he was the odd one out. This feeling of isolation was new to him, and interesting. No wonder the antique books say that the process of conquering a foreign world is actually a great challenge for Magi. It's extremely difficult to even think of such a thing now, especially the act of going against the whole world by oneself. Truly insane. Flames fumed in Leyland's eyes as he mumbled under his breath, his eyes flashing with excitement. I really wish to give it a try. The feeling of conquering a world. His exclamation was well and good, but time had arrived that he settle serious matters. Leyland stopped a long-haired, two-headed green being that was drooling out some unknown liquid. I need to get some information. Is there any place can fulfill my needs? If you can bring me there, this will be yours. Leyland took out a pinkish crystal and tossed it in front of the non-human, making his eyes brighten up. I'll bring you there. The sturdy man by the side of the two-headed being hemmed and hawed, as if he had to invest a lot of energy in speaking each and every word. Great! After you! Leyland's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. Clearly, the two-headed being was pretty familiar with streets of walking, every step of his long legs taking him a few meters ahead. He was originally worried that Leyland could not keep up with him, but after seeing Leyland at ease, he sped up. When they reached a remote alley, the two-headed fellow turned around and stammered, right here. Is it? Leyland looked around. The huge shadow of the building covered the region, blotting out the sun and leaving the entire place in darkness. A tinge of a somber mood was felt, and there was not a single person around. Heh, look, what Strap brought us. A green, multi-limbed being who looked like a grasshopper climbed along the side of the wall. The pair of crimson eyes on top of its triangular head stared at Leyland with a malicious intent. Ant tribe, or winged tribe, whatever, Old Hawk will surely pay a high price for his meat anyway. In concert with his voice, many other non-humans climbed out of the corners, all looking bloodthirsty and ferocious. I knew it. I just knew it would turn out this way. Leyland sighed helplessly. Why do you want to force me to use violence when we can resolve this peacefully? Leyland's puzzled look made the non-humans tremble, feeling as if they had done something wrong. Just as well. In any case, I'm short on quite a few foreign specimens. Leyland played with the ring on his finger, gracefully taking out a silver surgical knife. He looked focused and devoted. Oh no, please let me go. I don't know anything, they forced me. Half an hour later, the alley was filled with the reek of blood. All the non-humans had disappeared, leaving behind only the two-headed being kneeling on the ground, begging for mercy. However, it was a high-pitched female voice this time, coming from the other head. Really? Leyland wiped the silvery surgical knife, mirth in his eyes. It terrified the two-headed being whose hair stood on ends. I can help. I know the best information broker in the city. It's old Jake. I'm telling the truth. He even knows things about other worlds. I can bring you there right now. The being revealed its intelligence at the boundary between life and death, finally securing its life from the surgical knife Leyland had placed in front of it. Good. Bring me to him now. The surgical knife stopped right before the being's eyes, only a millimeter away. Yes, master, I will bring you there now. The creature wept, even wanting to die. If not for the fact that it was in its resting period, and if it had let its younger brother go out instead, it would never have come near a malefic like Leyland. It was useless to say anything now, though. It knew very well that it would end up like the scattered piles of flesh and bones if it did not bring Leyland to his destination and help him get what he wanted. It was no doubt that he was the local tyrant. In a short while, he had brought Leyland to an extensive basement area. Leyland got excited upon entering the place. This atmosphere of this place was pervaded with feelings of passion, madness, and death, causing the darkness elemental particles to be very concentrated here. It wouldn't take too long for this kind of place to give normal humans a mental disorder. Leyland stroked his chin, followed after the two-headed being. What brings you here, Strap? Do you want to play some games? A creature with the head of an ox patted the two-headed creature's shoulder with great strength. His right leg was missing, instead replaced with a giant metal limb. Leyland smelled an odor similar to that of marijuana from the ox head, coming from the crimson drink in his hand. It seemed to be an alcoholic drink of this world. No, I'm here for old Jake, you see. The two-headed being pointed at Leyland and started to whisper to the ox head with flattery. Off you go. The ox head took another look at Leyland. Perhaps it was the attractive, thin figure of Leyland that set him off guard. Underground wrestling match passing through a rusty metal door, Leyland entered a large underground arena. There were cheers, howls, even berserk roars sounding incessantly. At times one could hear the sound of weapons clashing, at others the sound of a body being pierced. The atmosphere was insane. The audience, who were composed of multiple races, waved pieces of paper in their hands as they yelled towards the middle of the arena. This. Leyland looked down towards the center with interest and immediately made a discovery. In a large cage made of steel was a werlion with golden fur. It was matched against several large monsters. These monsters looked like 8-legged crocodiles with mouths full of sharp teeth. Their mouths actually looked like saws with all the sharp teeth, boasting a viciousness and frightening power that would cause weaker beings to faint. Their opponent, the werlion, was unarmed and could only fight these monsters with its own fists. Heaps of muscles bulged on its body, holding in store its formidable strength. Just as Leyland glanced over, it mercilessly grabbed onto one of the crocodile's tails and ruthlessly flung it onto a metal bad. A large number of metallic thorns stabbed into the creature's body, and blood gushed out. The injury looked fatal. In exchange, the werlion's back now had several bloody scratches that were dripping with blood. A place for underground wrestling with bets and alcohol. Leyland nodded, beginning to have some expectations towards old Jake. The heads of such underground organizations were usually the people who acquired intel the most effectively. He would definitely have a huge network. After all, selling information was very profitable, and he would definitely not let this opportunity go. "Come with me." The oxhead limped as he led the way, guiding Leyland through several bar counters where many were raising their wine cups and roaring madly. He then opened a small wooden door. This door truly was tiny. Leyland's physique would be considered slender among the races of this world, and even he had to lower his head, half bowing before he could enter. Boom! The sturdy wooden door closed, isolating the room from the clamor outside. The moment before the door closed, Leyland vaguely saw the Warlion successfully taking care of two other monster crocodiles. Though it had paid a large price, it had still managed to keep its life. Large numbers of bets failed, and those who had lost their money bellowed, the cacophony almost overturning the entire arena. And still, when the wooden door closed, it was as if everything outside had no relation to this place. Serenity and insanity are only separated by a single door. Isn't that feeling amazing? Mr. Lay from the one-horned race's territory. A dwarf that was around a meter tall walked out. It had on a long silver robe, the bottom dragging on the ground. It held the same wine cup as the rest, an excited blush on its face. Its eyes, however, were cold. They were like a mass of ice, not a single ripple within them. A rational lunatic. That was Leyland's first impression of this dwarf. For it to be able to take control of such a large organization, it was evidently not a simple character. "You know me." Leyland had arrived at the lava world a few days ago, and he had only made contact with the one-horned race. The knowledge that the other party had found information on him so quickly caused him to be delighted. In this case, there was a higher chance of his plans being realized. "Of course, there are few who can defeat the summoner, Cleto. A sky-ranked master is definitely worthy of my respect." The dwarf bowed slightly, and Leyland was moved. It must have been a member of the ant race with its brown skin and two little antennae. For some reason, it had broken away from its community and formed a large underground organization in Walking City. Was it the merchants of the one-horned city? Leyland pondered over it for a moment and immediately answered. Pretty much the only ones who knew him in the entirety of Walking City was that lot. Indeed, it was them. Since they were escorted by Mr. Lay, I've already sent down orders that all their goods will be sold off at 10% higher than the market price. The dwarf of the ant race invited Leyland to take a seat and personally poured a glass of something similar to red wine for him slowly. The slight smell of alcohol, mixed with all kinds of fermented items that had anesthetic effects, immediately surrounded Leyland's nostrils. The alcohol of other races is really terrifying. They aren't even afraid of harming their bodies. Leyland shook his head, a little speechless. Though he was not afraid of these with the quality of his body, his tastes were well developed. Such a crudely made thing was not worthy of his attention, even if this alcohol was the best out of this dwarf's collection. "All right, respected guest, may I know your purpose in seeking out pitiful old Jake?" Seeing Leyland putting the wine cup down without taking a sip, Jake's expression did not change. He'd taken the initiative to bring up the topic, his eyes smiling. "Everything," Leyland chuckled lightly. "Everything," Jake cried out involuntarily. "What do you mean by everything?" "All the intelligence you have, everything you know. That includes this region as well as other areas. Whether it's a big or small issue, I want everything as long as it's valuable." Leyland's voice was low and had a unique charm to it. Hee. "Mr. Lay, do you know how much this information will cost?" Jake laughed, but his voice turned cold. "I know, but I can definitely afford it," Leyland answered without hesitation. "What are you going to use to pay for it?" Jake had already assumed he'd met a lunatic, or someone with a screw loose. "Your life, is that enough?" Leyland spoke coldly. "Crap!" Upon hearing Leyland's words, Jake immediately bowed and retreated, throwing himself behind a study table with a jump. With a push of some mechanism, a defensive layer of energy appeared instantly. Its movements were fluid, as if it had trained for this countless of times. Only after the layer rose did its expression become calm. A sneer raised on its lips. "Mr. Lay, don't you think you're going too far for a mere guest?" "I've never felt that way towards the weak." Leyland's voice was dull, and that caused Jake's face to flush. As if Leyland's words had touched on some nerve, Jake instantly grew furious. "Get him!" It called out suddenly, and a pink mist filled the room. Two figures rushed out from within, emanating powerful energy undulations. The two mice finally dare show themselves. You're only at the sky rank, is that so amazing? Leyland laughed slightly, a dark green layer of energy appearing from his body as a large hand grabbed forwards. Boom! Space itself seemed to freeze in place, and the two fierce black figures halted abruptly. Leyland held each of them by the neck. What appeared in his hands were two other dwarves that looked very similar to Jake. Energy undulations similar to that of a rank 3 Magus were continually emitted from them, but to Leyland this was far too weak. They were like a candle in a hurricane, a random wisp of wind enough to destroy them. Is this all you have to depend on? Any others? Leyland opened his mouth, and a vortex appeared in the air. The pink mist that had pervaded the air was sucked into Leyland's stomach. One of those that Leyland was holding suddenly seemed to recall something and even began to stutter. This powerful, you're a star rank. He sent the two flying, and they fell with a thud, fainting from their injuries. Swish. Seeing Leyland unraveling his trap and defeating two sky ranks so easily, Jake, who was within the defensive layer, could only grit his teeth and remove it, kneeling before him. Revered Master Ley, please forgive the petty me for offending you unknowingly. Jake is willing to hand over all power and information to you. You're smart and understand the situation. Good, I like people like you. A smile appeared on Leyland's face, but to Jake it looked like that of a devil. I don't want your organization or anything like that. I just need some information from you. Because you're tactful, I'll only purge a portion of your memories. Don't worry. Hearing Leyland's words, Jake immediately knelt in gratitude while forcing a laugh inside. Just a star rank was enough to destroy Walking City, and he had no means of fighting back. A few hours later, Leyland, who had obtained what he wanted, left the underground wrestling arena satisfied. The atmosphere in the arena was still very heated. Now, however, there were great battles between various races. Leyland even saw a few one-horned clansmen who were mere cannon fodder. The soundproofing effects of the wooden door were superb. There seemed to be some spell formation, and even though Leyland had caused a mess inside, nobody outside found out. Even that ox-headed person would not know that over the course of the past few hours, the leader of their organization had thoroughly bowed down at the hands of this young being of a different race. Of course, Leyland spurned the head of an underground organization. After using methods of psychological hints to confirm that it had handed over all the information, he had immediately modified its memories and even created a fake experience. This completely concealed the happenings of the day. After leaving the arena, Leyland found a random inn and, after paying with precious gems, received a large house. Of course, this wealth had been obtained with the generous sponsorship of old Jake. In Burwing race, the lava world was vast, and a few hundred years would not be enough to traverse the entire world. Based on the information he obtained from Jake, this continent that Leyland was on was the largest in the lava world, called Blazing Crown. Around Blazing Crown was an ocean formed of lava. Within this lava ocean were all kinds of terrifying high-energy beings, and it was a much more dangerous place than the oceans in the Magus world. Hence, communication between Blazing Crown and the other continents was minimal. Even the most powerful, extraordinary ones rarely left the continent. To Jake's knowledge, Blazing Crown was the heart of the lava world. The other continents were merely slightly large islands. What an interesting world! An ocean formed of lava. If those fire elemental magi were to find out about this place, they would be willing to migrate over even if it cost them a fortune. Leyland touched his chin, beginning to browse through the intelligence he had obtained from Jake. Though the information was very complicated, the AI chip had recorded everything and could quickly filter out the wrong and useless information, leaving behind the great amounts of valuable intel. It then combined a few pieces that seemed to be linked. Soon, Leyland managed to form an image of the true lava world. This was a world of flames. Fire elemental beings and lava creatures occupied over 80% of the area here. The one-horned race, as well as the ant race that Jake was a part of, could only somewhat survive at the edges of the continent. On the complete map of the continent, there were no signs of the single-horned city. Walking City was merely a black dot at the edge and was basically a remote and desolate place. 3 organizations stood at the apex of Blazing Crown. There was the Divine Flame Empire, made entirely of fire elemental beings. The Atlan Union was made up of the Emberwing race, a life form similar to humans, and then the Allied Kingdom was made up of the rest. There weren't any others at the same level as them. Of these three, the Divine Flame Empire was the most powerful. The Atlan Union and Allied Kingdom had to collaborate to stave off their invasions. Wars were incessantly fought as they tried to seize good territory from the lava and fire elemental beings. It was to the point that huge military campaigns were launched every few years. As for the divisions in their ranks, it was the same as what he'd already encountered. The weakest was exemplary, followed by Earth, Sky, and Star. As for those above the star rank, beings that possessed the strength of radiant moon magi, he hadn't come across any such thing. Although it could just be that Jake's organization hadn't acquired that level of information yet. Even so, Leyland's current strength allowed him to do as he liked in the lava world, as long as the other star ranks or Jupiter's lightning didn't set their sights on him. If I were Gilbert and the others, I would either find a place and hide myself completely, or build an organization in secret that would give off a distinct signal to the outside, letting any rescuers know where I am. Leyland's eyes flashed, and the AI chip immediately began to search through the data. Soon enough, a distinct heading attracted Leyland's attention. Riot at Eastern City of Atlan Union. Rebel Army, Triserpent Sect, has taken responsibility for the event. There are conjectures that this could be a retaliation in response to the large-scaled attack of the Union. Triserpent Sect? This phrase, that was full of meaning, immediately got him to make a mental association. Isolate all information about the Triserpent Sect, Leyland commanded. With the keyword found, the AI chip's search went more quickly. Almost instantly, information relating to the Triserpent Sect was projected in front of him. Through reading this information, Leyland gained a deeper understanding of this organization. The Triserpent Sect, which was also called the Triserpent Resistance Army, was an up-and-coming organization, and its development was rapid. With the goal of overthrowing the rule of the Atlan Union, their operations were unpredictable and very much supported by the lower-class commoners. It was said that there were 3 heads of the Triserpent Sect, and they were terribly powerful. The Atlan Union's attempts at cornering and annihilating them were to no avail. However, days ago, the Atlan Union had suddenly announced that they had achieved victory while trying to eliminate the Triserpent Sect. Not only had they destroyed many of its branches, they had even killed the head. The news of rebellion that Leyland had seen was retaliation launched by the Triserpent Sect. Triserpent Sect. Interesting. Is it really the 3 dukes, or is this bait? Leyland touched his chin, but it was obvious that in the Atlan Union, there were clues of the location of the 2 Morning Star dukes. For this reason, Leyland had to go there no matter what. I keep having this feeling that the Atlan Union is very suspicious. Leyland touched his chin and sank deep into thought. The 3 dukes had no grudge against the Atlan Union. Why would they suddenly attack them? Unless they had made some astounding discovery in the Atlan Union. Come to think of it, Jupiter's lightning found this world first. It would be strange if they did not painstakingly manage it. Hence, if the ones working behind the scenes in the Atlan Union were Jupiter's lightning, that would explain everything. Leyland wondered as explored different possible solutions. Compared to the Divine Flame Empire that was against all foreigners and full of fire elementals, the Atlan Union formed of the Emberwing race, similar to humans, were easier to manipulate. On top of that, their strength was only second to the Divine Flame Empire in Blazing Crown, and was more suited to the needs of the Morning Star Magi of Jupiter's lightning. However, while this made sense logically, Leyland believed things could not be so simple. The same intuition that had helped him obtain astonishing harvests during dangerous moments was blaring sirens at him. No matter what it is, I need to go the Atlan Union. As for the Triserpent Sect, we'll see, Leyland sighed. Boiling lava and fiery red light formed the only luster of the lava world. And yet, even under this dazzling redness, life was growing stubbornly. This was a grassland, and little steel trees similar to the one Leyland had seen before and filled the area, along with vegetation whose leaves had jagged edges. A few slender channels of lava could be seen every once in a while, flowing past like little streams in the grasslands. Yet they could not harm the area at all. These plants that were like grass that had their roots firmly and deeply in the ground, even boring into the lava and absorbing its energy for their growth. The stubbornness for life had Leyland feeling surprised. Uncle Lay, why do you like watching this iron thread grass? A very fair girl cloaked in red darted over, the sparse red feathers covering her forehead bouncing up and down. This girl was no different from an ordinary human child if one disregarded the feathers on her forehead and on the back of her hand. This was the Imberwing race. In the lava world, besides fire elemental life forms, they were the largest racial group and formed the largest group in the Atlan Union. I just like them for their resilience, Leyland chuckled as he handed over a large piece of meat to her. Take this, I'm afraid we'll have to part here. Uncle Lay, are you leaving? The little girl sucked on her finger, looking reluctant. Though they had met on the road, the powerful aura of this clansman even had her father in awe. Based on her father's guesses, this Mr. Lay must be at least an earth rank working hard to temper oneself and fervently hoping to advance to a higher realm. Brother Lay, are you already leaving? Not long after, another large man of the Imberwing race rushed over. He had obviously just heard the news and looked anxious. Leyland now had a few fine red feathers on his forehead. This was the appearance of the Imberwing race. In the Atlan Union, it was much too eye-catching if he were to continue pretending to be of the winged race. Yes, working hard in this world can't stimulate my progress anymore. Hence, I've decided to join the army. Perhaps competing against those evil fire elementals of the Divine Flame Empire will help me advance to a higher level. Leyland's expression was callous. Besides, I've had a dream since I was young. I wanted to punish those flame bastards with my iron fist. Just in time for me to steal my skills in the upcoming battle at the Death Grand Canyon battle. Death Grand Canyon. The large man's eyeballs protruded. That was the front lines of the battle between the Atlan Union and Divine Flame Empire. That was also where the most casualties were. You! The large man only moved his lips, but seeing the resolute look on Leyland's face, he did not say more. My good brother, help me kill a few more fire elementals. The large man could only pat Leyland's shoulders as if wishing him luck, and he watched Leyland's figure disappear into the horizon. Ha! I've finally arrived. Leyland saw the outline of the Imberwing race in the distance and let out a long breath. The moment he had obtained intel on the Triserpent sect, he had immediately set off and hurried here in secret. However, as the lava world was much too big, and Walking City was located in a very remote area, he had expended much time and effort to reach this place. As for the large man and family of Imberwing race, they were only a few companions he had joined out of loneliness on the way here. Compared to the Magus world, many exemplary ranks join the army directly in the lava world and hold high rankings. If I want to obtain any information or intel, that would be the most convenient place. Testing and passing compared to the magi of the Magus world who like to work behind the scenes, the strong in the lava world were more willing to take the stage and take control of the organizations. The kingships of large-scaled kingdoms were taken up by star ranks. In that case, it was understandable for there to be a large number of exemplaries in the higher-ups of the Atlan Union's army. Furthermore, the army was the quickest place to advance in status, especially during wartime. As long as one was capable, had outstanding results, and nobody obstructed them, people were usually promoted rapidly. This was a method that was much better than others and also the way that Leyland liked the best. But there's so much hardship in being a soldier. I don't want to be trampled on. Leyland's eyes swiveled around as he had an idea. Days later, in a special building within the city. Are you here to apply for the special task force? Come with me. A female Imberwing race member said. She was dressed in a military uniform and was expressionless, yet looked to be formidable. She carried a stack of documents and forms and turned to leave, leaving Leyland and the rest with a view of her elegant back. This doll is really... A burly man beside Leyland began to complain. How callous, I like it. Another pale young man's eyes glowed green, leaving Leyland speechless. Those with Leyland were all of the Imberwing race. However, what made them distinct from the rest of their clansmen was the obvious energy undulations from their bodies. Since this world had exemplaries, it was obvious that they had special treatment and missions. Things like the Special Task Force were formed for this reason. With enough strength, Imberwing clansmen were allowed to be selected into the Special Task Force. Not only would their positions be high, they had the best treatment in the army. Leyland wanted to sneak in, and he obviously formed a fake identity and signed up successfully. What Leyland cared about was that the Special Task Force often needed to deal with riots that had to do with exemplaries. As long as he was there, he would definitely bump into the Triserpent sect. For this reason, he was in no hurry at all. He would swing in and sneak into the Special Task Force and hide away there while gathering more information. After all, he was not quite sure about the background of the Triserpent sect, and he needed to remain cautious. If this was a trap and he still charged right in, wouldn't he be seeking death? Leyland and the young male in Burwing looked just as nervous and excited as the rest while they followed the female soldier to a large square. A middle-aged soldier in silver armor was already waiting there, his expression grim. "We're beginning the test now. Who's first?" The middle-aged instructor's voice was so loud that everyone's eardrums seemed to have gone numb. "Me." That pale young man seemed to be too anxious to show off and darted to the front. "Fine. Use all your strength and attack the black obelisk ahead." The military instructor stepped aside and revealed a giant black crystal before everyone. "Ha!" The young man took a deep breath, and a layer of fire-red light was emitted from his body. Streams of air were dispelled as dust filled the air. Rumble. He threw a punch, and it landed on the black crystal. While it did not budge the slightest, a dim layer of red light appeared on the surface. Red light filled the obelisk with some difficulty, and fine rings appeared on the surface. A total of 5 red rings appeared before completely disappearing. Upon seeing this, a look of satisfaction flashed by the young man's expression. "MM, 5th level of F Ireplume technique, exemplary status. Pass." The officer nodded, with no surprise in his expression. "Next." His voice was icy cold, causing the young man's original complacency to disappear. "Me." The one who went up was plump and similarly used Fireplume technique. However, only 3 ringed runes appeared on the obelisk. "3rd level of Fireplume technique. Fail." The officer's voice was callous, and 2 soldiers immediately went forward and dragged him out. "Ah, wait, give me another chance, I can definitely." From a distance, the sounds of his wails and pleas could be heard, causing great fear amongst the crowd in the square. "Next!" The officer's expression remained cold as he continued. One young man after another went up and most passed the test, though there were a few who failed. The officer was ruthless as he commanded the soldiers to chase them out. Leyland watched this scene coolly from below. Fireplume technique. He had heard of it before and knew that it was used by the Imberwing race. It could be said to be found everywhere, and practically everyone knew it. There was nothing special about levels 1 to 3 of Fireplume technique, and was similar to the breathing techniques of the Magus world. It could increase one's vitality and endurance slightly, with some tolerance towards fire elements. Once one got to the 4th level of Fireplume technique, it would be similar to a meditation technique and allow the Imberwing clansmen to have a rapid increase in strength. The 4th and 5th level was the strength of an exemplary rank, while 6 and 7 meant earth rank. 8 and 9 were considerably powerful existences and were comparable to the sky rank. Once one advanced to the 10th level, of which there had been no precedent in history, that was the door to the star realm. Though the fundamental parts of Fireplume technique could be found everywhere, the 4th and 5th levels were kept somewhat secret and were considered the essence of the race. As for the next few levels, they were kept secure and could only be passed on in a few places. The reason why so many young people wanted to enter the special task force was probably because they wanted information on the later levels of the technique. As for the 10th level, that was something only the family of the head of Atlan Union possessed. Most had never even heard of it. A grave, burly, middle-aged Imberwing clansman went forward. Extending a scarlet palm, 6 fire rings immediately appeared on the obelisk, and even the officer couldn't help but give the man a second look. 6th level of Fireplume technique. Earth rank. Pass. How amazing, it's someone at level 6, the Earth rank. These sorts of people can survive anywhere. What is he doing here? It must be for the information regarding the 8th and 9th level of the technique. It's only passed on in the army. The appearance of what was the best results till now immediately gave rise to loud discussions in the queue. The man from before stood expressionlessly aside in answer to the looks of curiosity or reverence, and the officer couldn't help but have an expression of approval. "Next!" the officer yelled again, eyes scanning through the crowd that was beginning to thin. "I'm afraid that this burly man is the one with the best results in this batch. It's not a bad harvest. At least one is passable." The officer was stuck in this train of thought, but then he saw another slender clansman stand up. Though this above-average-looking man seemed frail, the officer's eyes brightened as he lapsed into thought. This little guy doesn't seem to be simple. Leyland obviously cared little about what the officer thought. In actuality, he was now performing research and gathering information on the path of Fireplume technique. Interesting. The beginning, it's night training, And after that, there seems to be content infused with some conscient runes. He was interested in such techniques. But I need to get through this. Leyland shook his head at the ruckus in the crowd due to his being in a daze for too long. A morning star Magus, point mass was a minute dot that could contain the terrifying strength of a morning star without leaking any energy. With the AI chip's help, there was no issue with simulating the energy belonging to Fireplume technique. It's a pity. The strongest person here is only the officer, who is at the sky rank with the 8th level of Fireplume technique. The next few levels, as well as that of the star rank, can't be obtained as of yet. Leyland slowly extended his palm. Yet it seemed like a layer of melting flame came to life, spreading across its surface. This immediately silenced the crowd. Ha! Leyland controlled his strength, looking as if he was attacking with all he had. Rumble. The entire obelisk began to tremble as bright fiery runes appeared one after another. 1, 2, 3. The light from bright flames were dazzling and spread till there were 7 on the obelisk. There even seemed to be half a ring extra. The officer's eyes shone and he immediately asked, 7th level of Fireplume technique. Peak Earth rank, very good, what's your name? My name is Ley, my lord. Leyland performed a military salute, something the officer immediately found pleasing. At this moment, the silent crowd suddenly became boisterous, hearts filled with jealousy that could not be suppressed while observing Leyland's handsome face. As long as this young man did not die in battle, he would become the rising star of the Special Task Force or even the entire Union. At this moment, Leyland acutely felt a gaze land on his back. It's the large man from before at the 6th level. This feeling of jealousy and hostility. Though it's normal, why is there killing intent? The corner of Leyland's lips rose in a cold smile. An enemy of this level was too boring. When all those who had failed cleared out, the officer stood before Leyland and the rest, voice booming. Welcome to the Special Task Force. I am your officer, Skyker. You'll soon find that the Special Task Force is the best place to be. As long as you complete your missions, we can give you techniques, money, status, or land. It had to be said that the officer was silver-tongued. In a short amount of time, he had incited the hot-bloodedness of the youths. Leyland's expression was also one of excitement, though he found this all ridiculous on the inside. Now, follow me to participate in your first mission. Powerful undulations were emitted from Skyker's body. Only then did the members realize that their officer was actually at the sky rank.